Hello students, welcome to week 5 of Business 340, Principles of Management. There are a number of objectives we are accomplishing this week from chapter 10, including defining attitudes and the relationship to personality, behavior, and perception. We're going to be discussing the importance of work-related attitudes. We're going to be defining major personality traits and describing how personality can influence the workplace attitudes and behaviors. We're also going to be explaining emotional intelligence and understanding its importance in the workplace. Let's start by introducing 2 personality traits that wind their way through this chapter on organizational behavior. Self-confidence is the general assurance in one's own ideas, judgment, and capabilities. You know what that is. When you have self-confidence, you are poised and self-assured of what you're doing. If you don't have this, then you know what it's like not to have it. All right. I'd also add that each of us goes through time periods of having good self-confidence or not. I hope you'll let God be the cornerstone of your self-confidence. Don't let your confidence be in you in the strictest definition of the self-confidence definition. Let God drive that in you. Another term is self-efficacy. It's an individual's strong belief that he or she can successfully accomplish a specific task or outcome. It's a belief about yourself to get something done. Someone with high self-efficacy knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that they'll be successful at something, at the thing they're working on. Now, this is not really an arrogance kind of thing. It's just an extreme level of confidence. And by the way, the text spends a lot of time on the concepts of individual attitudes and organizational behavior. So be sure to read about these in the first part of chapter 10. They'll likely be on the quiz, and that's a hint for you. Let's talk for a moment about perceptions. And there are a number of perceptual distortion errors that we engage in, especially in the social context of work. Here's one of those. It's called stereotyping. And the text defines stereotyping as the tendency to assign an individual to a group or a broad category, and then to attribute widely held generalizations about that group to that individual. So, an example is about athletes, university athletes. Sometimes we often attribute an easy academic load to all those athletes because we don't think they're very smart, or that they have the ability to take hard classes. We think, hey, they're at the university for their athletic talent, not their academic prowess. Well, be careful with stereotyping. This stereotype is often not true of university athletes. What about the halo effect? An overall impression of a person based on one characteristic is the definition. So we're often blinded to a person's true character because we see one positive characteristic about them and then assume that the rest of their character is like that one positive characteristic that we observe. This can be a dangerous activity on our part. Always get the full measure of someone before establishing your impression of them. This can also work for the negative impressions too. Sometimes we attribute all negative characteristics to somebody because we've seen one negative thing associated with them. What about projection? And that's the tendency for people to see their own personal traits in other people. If you will, projecting your own needs and feelings and values and attitudes onto other people. You're judging other people by how you see yourself. In other words, we see people the way we see ourselves. Again, this can be a very foolish thing to do. Let God's discernment guide you as you meet and interact with new people. Chapter 10 also dives into measurable personality and behavior traits. Measurable, that is. Check out the definitions on page 409 for the following, what's called the Big 5 personality traits. Extroversion, it's a measure of how outgoing somebody is. Agreeableness, it's a measure of how well someone gets along with other people. Emotional stability is a measure of calm and self-confidence that somebody has. Then a final measure is openness to experience. It's a measure of a broad range of experiences that a person has and lived and experiences in their life. In addition to those big 5 personality traits, the chapter also explores the measure of 4 other personality traits that are important to being a manager. One of those is called locus of control. That refers to how people perceive the cause of life events, the things that happen to them. You might be able to better state this as the following question. Do people see themselves as a victim, or do they own up to control their own lives? We all know those people at work who are always the victim when bad things happen around them. So locus of control talks about that particular issue. Here's one, authoritarianism. It's a belief that power and status differences should exist within the organization. In other words, these people believe that there should be an organizational structure that respects power and authority, chain of command, if you will. Now listen, there are arguments both for and against this particular personality trait and how it's measured, but it's important to know it's out there, authoritarianism. Machiavellianism, it's the acquisition of power and the manipulation of other people for purely personal gain. Not such a good personality trait to have, all right? How about this last one? Another way that we measure personality is to talk about how someone solves problems. Managers need to recognize that individuals solve problems and make decisions in different ways. There's much research in this area of how people make decisions and their styles of making decisions. Now, read about the Myers-Briggs type indicator in your text and then take that self-test. It's on page 430. In fact, that's your discussion question 1 for this week. Now, I did the same test and it's held pretty much true over the years. So my problem-solving type is an INTP. INTP. So read about my personality type and then be sure to tell the class about yours as part of discussion question 1. Okay, also read and study exhibit 10.12. It's on page 423. This section of the chapter explains different learning styles. Personally, I tend to be more of an assimilator at this point in my life. However, in my teens and 20s and early to mid 30s, I was a converger. And remember, there are both advantages and disadvantages of each style of learning. And you can change your learning style. Our minds are wonderful gifts of God. Let Him shape you as your life changes and the situations around you change. Now, and finally, like last week's overview, let's talk for a moment about 2 upcoming assignments that I want you to be thinking about. For week 7 assignment, you'll be interviewing 2 managers in 2 different professions and writing a paper about them. You're going to create a list of 10 questions minimum. You'll interview them, these 2 people, and then write about them by doing comparisons and contrasts to each other. Make sure you include items from the course text in that comparison and contrasting. In last week's discussion question, you provided some questions to ask during that interview. Now, I've given each of you some feedback on those questions to help you fine-tune those interview questions that you're going to be having for week 7. Let's talk about week 8 again. You'll be doing a one-on-one presentation with me. Now, this is a 10-minute presentation at most based on week 3's paper about a local restaurant. Now, for this presentation, you're going to prepare a PowerPoint about what you wrote about regarding the local restaurant back there in week 3 and how additional learned concepts of the course, like decision-making, organizational behavior, leadership, managing employees, etc., how that applies to that local restaurant as well. Some of these concepts we've learned after week 3, so I want you to incorporate them in to the presentation about the local restaurant. Now again, this is going to be a 10-minute presentation using Zoom. And my purpose for doing this is not to make you crazy, okay, and to give you problems and get you all nervous. It's really just to make sure you're ready to do online presentations as you progress through your career. Again, check out the syllabus to be ready for week 7 and week 8. All right, that's it. As a reminder, your initial response to the discussion questions are due on Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. Arizona time. And the weekly quiz is due by Friday, 11:59 p.m. also Arizona time. And the writing assignment's due by Sunday night, 11:59 p.m. Now don't forget that I hold virtual office hours each Tuesday from 7:30 p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m., 30 minutes there. You can find the Zoom link to my weekly virtual office hours on the home page or in the course Welcome tab on the How-To page. All right, that's it. Remember, God is on His throne. He's always been there and He's always going to be. Have a great week.